Hello and welcome. I'd like to wish everyone a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thanks for joining us. My name is Tiffany. And I'm a part of Kinkly. Kinkly's mission is to promote conversations around sex, answer readers' questions, and ultimately help you all discover more about sex, your bodies, and pursuing pleasure in ways that are safe, healthy, consensual, and fun. Today, we're proud to present our webinar, Erotic Edging. This webinar is being presented by Satisfier, a great company that we just love working with. Before we get started, just a note, today's webinar is being recorded and we will send out a link to the recording shortly after the end of the live presentation, so you can listen to it at your leisure or listen to it again. We'll do our best to keep this presentation interactive, so feel free to enter your questions into the Zoom console as we go along, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Megwin White. I'm very grateful to have you sit back, relax, and enjoy this webinar. With that, Megwin, please take it away.
Thank you, Tiffany, and thank you everyone for joining today. I am super excited to explore the topic of erotic edging with you. This, quite frankly, is my favorite topic when it comes to sexuality and sexual exploration. So I want to just first start with just briefly introducing myself. My name is Megwin White. I'm a certified clinical sexologist, and I have been a sex educator and a sex coach for the last 10 years. I now serve as Director of Education for Satisfier. But I also have a background in body work, and I was a yoga practitioner for many years and also a Pilates teacher for many years. So my interest in the body really spans most of my life. And what I really want to do in terms of my own education is to ultimately really inspire that interest in the body, because it is such a gift that we have, and it is really an endless gift. So with that, I would love to introduce Satisfier. Satisfier is a global sexual wellness brand. We're best known for innovating the most diverse and innovative range of pleasure products available on the market. And we do that all at accessible price points. And the reason we do it at accessible price points is that we truly believe that every single person deserves access to pleasure, regardless of their race, their gender, their socioeconomic status. And it's really our vision and our mission to inspire joy and curiosity, and ultimately support a healthy sexual lifestyle at any life stage. And before we begin today's talk, I want to first start by just mentioning that I am going to be using certain terms. I might be using terms like male or female when I refer to genitals. I might also talk about genitals just as genitals. And I'm only mentioning that because I want everybody to know that we now know that genitals do not necessarily correspond or correlate with gender. They can, but they don't often correlate. And that has actually allowed us into the awareness that there are many genders. Gender exists on a spectrum. So as you're watching this, I really want to invite you to view it through your own lens of experience. I am again going to use these terms very loosely, and I do that with a focus and intent on helping to hopefully guide you into your own experience, and hopefully guide you also into expanding your mind in regards to what's possible. So with that, let's go ahead and begin with the outline for today. So we're going to first start with what exactly is edging. We're going to then look at the sexual response cycle through a few different models, because there are quite a few different models that have been put forth. And then we're going to look at the benefits of edging, which there are so many, probably many more than I can really even touch upon within this particular webinar. And then we're going to look at what's really important to keep in the back of your mind, to remember when you're exploring edging. And we're going to look at the frameworks of edging. So these are kind of similar to what to remember, but these are more of like the structural frameworks that you can use and which can allow you to really loosely explore edging. And then we're going to look at more specific applications. So these are techniques, these are tools, these are mediums, if you will, to explore the art of sexual arousal. And then we're going to explore some really fun edging accessories. So these are things that you can play with. These are things that you can incorporate within your partnership, within your own self-exploration, and they're super fun. And I'm very, very excited for that. So let's talk first about what exactly is edging. Well, first thing to note is that it has many different names, right? So what we call something sometimes also opens us up to that potential. So there's edging, teasing, brinking, surfing, peaking, and you can come up with your own name because really it's not written in stone, but the concept behind edging is really to educate the body on really opening up to a whole new dimension of sexual arousal. So first there's self-edging, and then there's also mutual partner edging. I would really want you to think about the concept that self-edging is going to be the most important key into actually guiding you into mutual partner edging. Because the more self-aware you are, the more self-educated you are, the more you can actually bring that awareness into your partnership. So edging essentially is the practice of taking yourself or someone else to that brink of orgasmic release without holding back, while holding back as a way to build excitement. And this can be explored as a therapeutic technique, and it can also help to deepen and strengthen orgasms. So now let's look at the sexual response cycle. I mentioned that we're going to be exploring it through a few different models. So first, we have the sexual response cycle as put forth by Masters and Johnson. So this was basically a sexology duo that was doing research in the 50s, if you believe it or not, on sexual response. And they were really pioneers and forerunners in this field because they wanted to see, were there commonalities within the arousal response? And were there things that we were missing when we're looking at arousal? And so they came up with this 4-phasic model of excitement, plateau, orgasm, and what's called resolution. So you can imagine what resolution would be. We're going to go through these now in a little bit more detail so that you can understand them. So first, of course, we have excitement. Right? It's characterized by that anticipation. You might start to feel your skin start to flush. You might start to blush a little bit. It's your object of desire is entering the room. You might start to feel your muscles get tense. Your heart beats a little bit faster. Your blood vessels might begin to dilate, and your nipples might even get hard or erect. And then additionally, you might feel some swelling in your vagina, some lubrication. And if you have a penis, you might start to feel yourself getting a little partially erect at this moment. And you also might feel that your scrotum is withdrawing. And then the next stage is the plateau stage. So this is, go back here, the plateau stage, so that everything that happened in stage 1 gets a little bit more intense. Our genitals start to become a little bit more sensitive, right? There's more blood, there's more engorgement, there's more nerves becoming activated. If you have a clitoris, this is the moment where it might retract underneath the hood. Testicles are going to withdraw even deeper up into the scrotum, and the penis might release a little bit of what's called pre-cum. And you might also feel yourself drawing closer and closer to that orgasmic release. And then the next stage here we have is orgasm. So this is where breathing is going to get more intense. Your heartbeat is like really, really rapid. You might experience involuntary muscle contractions, particularly around that area of the pelvic floor. And that can result in that feeling of ecstasy, that increased lubrication in the vagina. And it can result in ejaculation from the semen from the penis. So if you're watching this and you're thinking to yourself, kind of feeling into some of these different stages, and you're wondering, is stage 2, the plateau stage, kind of that stage where you want to really explore edging? you're 100% right, but there is some gray zone here. So we'll move on to the last stage, which is resolution. So this is when everything starts to go a little bit more calm. We go into like a bit of a Zen zone, right? We've had that release. We've had all those neurochemicals flooding into the brain. And then we have additional neurochemicals like prolactin and oxytocin. And this is where we start to really slow down. Our vitals start to normalize. We start to feel really relaxed. We might even get so relaxed that we fall asleep. For those with penises, this is when the refractory period starts. So that just means that this is the time when you're not going to be responsive to stimulation, just kind of letting go, you're relaxed. But what Masters and Johnson found was that those with vulvas had a much more temporary stretch of refractory period where they could actually get re-aroused again. And so that's where we come to this idea of women being multi-orgasmic, right? So they were really looking at arousing people through these different stages. And just a note that this particular stage can last for a few minutes, for up to a few days, or even longer. So it looks like my volume was off. I just want to, Tiffany, can I just check in with you for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did my volume go off in the midst of the presentation, or was it right from the beginning? So
Just about a second ago. We just missed the
oh,
last slide. If you could go over that,
okay,
we would
perfect.
all appreciate it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, so now we go into a new model. So this was a model that was put forth by Helen Singer Kaplan, and this was really a model where she saw that there was a gap within the original model because the focus on that particular study was done specifically on physiological arousal. She saw that there was something missing, and the something missing was really sexual desire. So she saw this as a psychological phase that was really crucial, especially because most of us are exploring sexual explorations in the context of partnership or in the context of our fantasies. And so she really saw this as very, very key to exploring arousal and to actually having it be something that precipitates that comes before that excitement phase. And then next we have Rosemary Bassan's model of sexual motivation, and it gets even more complicated. This is a circular model. So she kind of expanded on Helen Singer Kaplan model and saw that, yes, desire is really important, but there are also other motivators when it comes to sexual exploration that can actually allow us to become more arousable. So what she really saw was that there was kind of like almost these two camps. So there was people that were spontaneously affected by desire and arousal. And then there was also those with responsive desire. And so basically, you can kind of intuit what that means. Spontaneous desires. I get horny in the moment. I want my partner and I'm just ready to go. A lot of people, though, are more responsive and what we could even call contextually based. They might be motivated by having more intimacy with their partner, by just wanting to feel a little bit closer to their partner, but maybe even wanting to release stress. So whatever our sexual motivation is, that often also helps to reinforce our ability to be responsive. So just keep that in mind as we explore. And then we also have something additionally, the idea or the fact that there is something called arousal non-concordance. Arousal non-concordance basically means that my genitals are not in accordance with what's happening subjectively in terms of my desire in my brain. So I might, for instance, feel really excited, really turned on by my partner, but my genitals are not responding. So what they found in research was that men have actually a fairly consistent overlap when it comes to subjective arousal and genital response, But for women, there is actually a larger gap. There is a larger space where these two things might not necessarily be in concordance. So again, it's not uncommon for a woman to not get lubricated, but she may be feeling very sexually turned on. She may be actually feeling a lot of pleasure in the experience, but you might not notice those physical markers that we observed in that first stage, or in that first model that we explored. So these are just things to keep in mind. I just want to kind of share with you the complexity that this is not necessarily a linear process, and we're probably going to continue to learn more as research goes on. So now let's talk about the benefits of edging, the benefits of stimulating to that edge point of that climax. We're going over the edge. So the first benefit is that it increases desire. So when we're holding back something that we want, we all have had this experience. You want something, but you can't get it. What happens is that you create kind of a vacuum, right? And that vacuum wants to be filled. That vacuum wants to be potentiated. It wants to open. And so by holding back, we actually increase desire. And as we just saw in the previous models, that desire is super important to sexual response. So it's really, really a powerful tool that you can use to really help to reinforce that energy of desire. And then next is that it's going to extend the time of your play by allowing you to shift away from a goal and really focus on the journey instead, right? So it's kind of like riding a train. You get to like experience, you get to see the scenery, you get to experience the partnership between you and your partner, and you get to experience all of those subtleties, because now you don't have that goal of climax as the space that you're heading. You don't focus on that so much that you rush to that climactic experience. And as we do this, I think it's especially powerful as we age, because oftentimes we get super habituated. And, you can imagine yourself when you were younger, you get super turned on very easily. But as we get older, things start to become a little bit more habituated. And this is a really, really great way of extending arousal. And just to note that, again, this is just random research here, but 10 to 15% of women are what's called anorgasmic. So that means that they have never experienced an orgasm at all. And so 10 to 15% might not be a big number, but it actually, if you think about it in the context of the larger whole, it actually is a lot. And just an interesting fact, or a fun fact, is that Marilyn Monroe, the sex icon of America, was actually considered anorgasmic. It was only right before she passed away that she shared with her therapist that she had had her first orgasm. So why am I mentioning this? Because edging is amazing for those women that maybe aren't as responsive to having orgasms, because it really opens up that space of vulnerability, that space where you can relax, you can experience pleasure, you can open up to being vulnerable in the moment, so that you can actually potentially surrender to orgasm, or potentially simply just surrender to the pleasure of the moment. And then lastly, this is where you almost need a drum roll, is that men have the potential to be multi-orgasmic. So that basically, if you've never heard of that concept, basically we now know that ejaculation and orgasm do not necessarily go hand in hand. You do not need to ejaculate in order to have an orgasm. So it's a common practice in the ancient times, in the Taoist traditions, in the tantric traditions, for men to actually hold back that ejaculation. And what they found was that not only were they're experiencing more vitality, more life force energy, but also they were having orgasms. And this is something that I have experienced with my own partners. I've spoken to men, and this oftentimes happens maybe even as we get older, as we get more tuned into those subtleties. But just really know that you, as a man, if you are a man, if you are a penis, if you have a penis, that you can be multi-orgasmic. The next is that edging is going to really offer us the opportunity to intensify orgasms. So a lot of times people talk about orgasms as a kind of like a roller coaster. When we edge the orgasm, it's kind of like we're taking that time to go up that peak, and we're allowing ourselves to really experience that anticipation, right? That moment right before we drop. We don't even know when it's going to happen. And that's kind of the excitement and the power of edging. So now, what do you want to remember when you're exploring edging? What do you want to keep in the back of your mind as you delve into what might be a new practice? So the first and most important thing is that you want to tune in. You really want to tune into yourself, to your own arousal state. You also want to tune into your partner's arousal. And it sometimes means that you have to lean in, and you have to lean in and to feel, is my partner a yes to this experience, or do they need maybe something a little bit different? Right? It's allowing us to really tune into the intelligence of the body, just like the hairs of the body often are communicating something even before our mind understands it. So really explore tuning in. And to coincide with that, how do we tune in? So the first area that we really tune in physiologically is with our breath. Our breath is crucial to helping us be responsive to desire. It's also crucial to helping us calm down, to bring our nervous systems into a more grounded, calm state. But as you can see from this image here, is that breathing actually has the potential to be a full-bodied activity. We don't just breathe with our lungs and our diaphragm. When we breathe really sensually, when we allow ourselves to drop our breath all the way down, we actually breathe into our pelvic floor, which has the amazing effect of stimulating our genitals and also helping to open ourselves up to orgasmic release and also orgasmic control, if you will. So the next thing we're going to explore are edging frameworks. These are just overarching frameworks to keep in mind as you're exploring edging. So the first is actually one of the first sexual self-care techniques that was developed by a urologist named James Siemens in 1956 as a way to address premature ejaculation. Now, before we even kind of get started with what the technique is, let's just first mention that what I'm going to term ejaculation control, as opposed to premature ejaculation, actually affects about 25 to 40% of the population. Now, the reason I'm going to use the term ejaculation control instead of premature ejaculation is that there actually isn't a definitive diagnosis of what premature ejaculation is. It can happen in 3 minutes, it can happen in 5 minutes, it could happen in 7 minutes. But really what it has to do with it is the inability to control ejaculation. So, you know, it's helpful to look at these terms and kind of reclaim them in different ways, because in some ways calling it premature is, I think, a little bit of an infantilizing kind of term. But essentially, the stop-start method was really about stimulating the body, self-stimulating the body through masturbation to that edge point where you're almost going over the edge. So what it actually reinforced was that self-awareness, was that ability for people to tune in to what was going on with the body. And then it's right before you get to that edge, you stop. And you might even lose the erection. You might lose that arousal response, but then you start again. And so it's common to do this type of technique like 3 times. You can do it in 3 cycles. And what'll start to happen is that you actually start to open up into a different framework, which is kind of a continuation of the last, which is the 5-10 framework. So again, we're looking at that arousal, building up the arousal till right before that edge, right? So that would be like the 10. 1 would be not aroused at all. 5 is this middle zone. And here's where we have the overlap. So what this particular stop-start method was, what it helped is that it reinforced, it solidified this edging space so that you could start to feel more confident, more self-assured that yes, I can stay in this place. I can control my ejaculation. I can support my arousal response. So, but just reinforcing that it sometimes takes practice, and that's okay. So edging applications. So these are basically tools that you can use. And I mentioned mediums before. Really think about them in that way. There's so many different mediums to explore sexuality. So the first and the simplest is shifting focus. So if you're focusing so much on a particular erogenous zone, you're fixated on that particular erogenous zone, what happens is your nervous system goes into overwhelm. It literally just drops out. It can't control itself anymore. So we really need to stay, again, tuned in to note, when a particular erogenous zone is being overly stimulated, and to allow ourselves to shift focus. And shifting focus also is present in the context of masturbation. So for instance, for those with penises, if you're masturbating always with the same hand, that becomes a habituated pattern. Your body starts to build up a memory. It reinforces that pattern. And so if you simply use a different hand, that actually opens up brain pathways. It allows you to actually access new pathways within your brain that allow you to feel things in a new way. It could also mean that you, instead of masturbating with, a hand on skin, that you use a condom, or maybe you introduce a sexual wellness device, a sex toy, or you shift focus to a completely different area, focus on the breasts or a different erogenous zone. And then next we have the squeeze method. And this is something that is so powerful to explore, especially in partnership or especially on your own. So if you're someone that has maybe difficulty with that ejaculatory control, or maybe you're just really, really excited, this is a sexy way to actually help to inhibit that ejaculatory release. And it has to do with firmly squeezing the tip or the base of the penis. I'm going to show you one additional method at the very end as well, to basically stop ejaculation. So let's look a little bit at the penis. So first, the penis is made up of three main corporeal bodies. So we have the corpus cavernosum, and then there's two of those, and then we also have the corpus spongiosum. So it's actually within the corpus spongiosum. That's actually where the urethra is, and that's where urine empties out of the body, and that's also where semen exits out of the body. And so what happens is that within the squeeze method, what we're doing is we're squeezing the frenulum, and that's a very, very sensitive area of the penis right before the head. There's a little bit of raised tissue. This is also where the foreskin connects to the penis. And so this is a very sensitive area. But what you do is you're going to use your thumb and you're going to gently press into the frenulum. And then with your other two fingers, you're going to squeeze the opposite side. So you're creating a gentle hold. So what this does is it actually does a number of different things. First of all, it's very calming, it's very grounding, and it's also going to inhibit that semen from wanting to inhibit that ejaculatory response. So kind of in the same vein, we can do the similar type of thing by squeezing the root of the penis. What you're seeing here highlighted is actually a muscle called the bulbus spongiosum. And this is a muscle that surrounds the root of the penis. And it's also a really key muscle within the context of our pelvic floor. This is also a muscle that helps the penis become nicely erect. It's kind of stands up when this muscle is strong, when it's has a lot of muscle tonality. So when we squeeze this area of the penis, it has a similar type of effect. It allows us to get into a calmer state. It allows you to inhibit that ejaculatory response, but it's, again, very grounding, and it's also sending a message to those other pelvic floor muscles to ground the nervous system to inhibit that response. And so if we take that a step further and we look here at the PC muscles, we can see that these underlie the visceral organs, they underlie the rectum, the intestines, the urinary bladder here. And so these are muscles that are really important, again, to keep strong and healthy. But an area that you can press into is right in this area. It's this perineal tissue, and it's actually right in line also with the prostate here. So a nice firm pressure, perhaps with a few fingers, perhaps with a thumb, can really help to inhibit that ejaculatory response. And it's also a really nice area to explore edging on its own. In fact, all of these three areas that I just mentioned are really, really wonderful areas to tease and to explore. But when used, when applied with firm application, it's going to be very grounding and help to inhibit that ejaculatory response. Okay. So you might be thinking, especially if you're a man or if you're someone with a penis, you might be wondering, is edging going to cause blockage? Maybe you've never experienced orgasm, without ejaculation. So number one is that it does take a little time to get used to. It might feel a little bit uncomfortable at first, but it's really something that the main key to get over the edge of what you might consider blockage is really to be able to relax the body, to relax the nervous system. And but just a helpful thing to note is that ejaculation has zero effect on libido. So unused sperm are actually recycled. They're reused in the body, or perhaps they're released as what's called nocturnal emissions. And basically that's a fancy word for wet dreams. So what didn't happen in that moment might happen later. It might not happen later, but ultimately you can, be confident in the knowledge that that semen is going to get recycled, reused. So there's nothing to be afraid of, really, when exploring edging, and really the key to opening up into a new dimension is to really start to have command over that relaxation response. So now we go into the tapping technique, and this is a wonderful technique that is especially great for those with vulvas. It's a great technique to really encourage the engorgement of blood, also called tumescence, and to helping release sexual tension. And this is a wonderful approach, especially if you want to experience edging on your own. Sometimes it's hard, to explore edging in the context of masturbation because we kind of know what's going to come next. But in the context of tapping, right, we're using these small little touches. We're tapping throughout the different areas of the vulva to essentially stimulate, to awaken what's actually behind the vulva. So when we look behind the vulva, we see the clitoris, right? This is the most important sex organ when it comes to female sexuality. It is also made up of erectile tissues, highly innervated with nerves, 8,000 nerve endings, just even in that clitoral gland area. So this tapping really helps to tease in a way. It actually, what we're doing is we're edging the awareness of the clitoris, which is right behind. But having this understanding, having the anatomy in the back of your mind can really open up that neural sensitivity. So allow yourself to remember these images as you explore and really experiment with this practice of tapping. And also tapping can be explored in the context of partner relationships. A penis is an incredible tool to tap into all of these areas. It's a wonderful way to build and to shift that excitement and that experience of arousal. Or you could use a toy, you could use a number of different things, you could use your tongue. Really tapping, you could explore tapping with a variety of different mediums. Okay, so next, soft edging. So, soft edging, you might kind of consider it, or you might think it's kind of like a foreplay. So it is in a way, it's sort of like foreplay, but you're actually mixing it into that space of that high arousal. So maybe you're using a very intense, you're exploring with a lot of friction, a lot of intensity. And then you shift focus. You shift focus to something softer, like the soft touch of your hand, just slowly grazing across a particular area. Or maybe you use your breath. I mean, breath just blowing on, let's say, the clitoral glands or the glands of the penis or the scrotum. All of these areas become more heightened. They become more sensitive all of a sudden. They're then looking for what's the next touch going to be. So soft edging is something that I highly, highly recommend. And next we have grounding touch. So grounding touch is another way of shifting focus. So again, when things get really intense, highly aroused, we can use grounding touch, which is firm touch. It's touch with intention. It's touch that is intended to slow down arousal. So, and I really, really say that with emphasis because it's not just putting a hand on a vulva. It's putting the hand on the vulva with intention to slow down arousal, or it's rooting the penis, or it's rooting that area just underneath the head of the penis, as we discussed earlier with the squeeze method. Those are all examples of grounding touch, but it can also be touching the thighs. It can be firmly touching the feet. You can really pick almost any area of the body, but I would say grounding touch works very well with the lower body. So next we have one of my favorites and something that I don't think is talked about enough, which is vocal edging. So this is actually using your own voice, which is essentially vibration, which also offers a high degree of stimulation. Just like a lot of our products at Satisfier, we use vibration in a lot of our products. Your voice has the power to stimulate with accuracy, with precision, with nuance, and with that added benefit of being very intimate and very unique to you. So one thing I do want to mention with vocal edging is that what is hotter when it comes to vocal edging is the voice when it is in more of a visceral context, right? We're not just talking about any kind of voice, but voice that is really rooted in the body. So here you have the vagus nerve, and this is this wonderful neurological plexus that bridges the brain with many different visceral organs, vital organs, right? The heart, the lungs, the intestines, but also the sex organs. It's also the neurological plexus that helps us to downregulate that stress response, which helps us to be able to even be feeling available to sensuality. But one of the really cool things that they've discovered about the vagus nerve is that it's also tied to the voice. So we have the capacity to self-stimulate this really important neurological plexus using the power of our voice, especially when it's expressed in an authentic way. But also, again, we can use the power of the voice to stimulate our partners. So this is another one of those images, just like really any of the anatomy images that I'm sharing with you, really keep this image in mind and try to bring it into your exploration of edging, because it really is going to open you up to being multi-orgasmic. The vagus nerve is crucial to opening up to different states of arousal. So edging while penetrating, this is basically, something that is really, really exciting to do with a partner. It really is about edging into the different zones, whether it's the vagina or the anus. You have all of these different wonderful areas to stimulate and to explore. And again, when you get out of that habituated pattern of constantly thrusting deep and going very fast and quickly, you can start to really activate the sensitivity of, let's say, the G-spot or the prostate. And so edging while penetrating doesn't have to be done just with a body part. It could be done again with a product. It could be done with the fingers. You can explore in a lot of different ways. So now we can look at this from positions. So these are great edging positions. So this first one is called the champagne position, and it's on the Kinkley website. She has a satisfier in hand, And that's going to be really awesome when you're exploring edging, because it gives you the opportunity, the potential to stimulate those clitoral glands indirectly via that air pulse technology. She's leaning forward here, though. I want to highlight that. So leaning forward is going to help to angle the penis more into the G spot. So a way of self-exploring edging, if she is the one here within this framework that wants to explore that, she can lean forward, and then maybe she wants to ease up a little bit. She can lean back and relax back into the breath of her partner. Leaning forward is going to most likely intensify the sensations by bringing more attention onto the clitoris. And then she can also use her legs. She can lift above the penis and kind of actually control the intensity of the penetration. And similarly, he can use his hands here to adjust the penetration. And then we have a sideline position here. So this is the binding spoon position. So in this sideline position, you have the potential to modulate the intensity of the penetration. Either partners can really do that. But then you also have that opportunity to shift attention, shift focus. So right here, we're seeing that there's an opportunity to stimulate the breast tissue, to stimulate the neck. There's a lot of opportunities for erogenous play within this particular position. And then lastly, we have the opportunity to edge in the context of anal play. So these are two men exploring, and you can see that the receiving partner here is leaning forward. He's in this very relaxed position, but similarly to the champagne position, when he leans forward, there's more opportunity to penetrate that prostate, to really stimulate that very, very sensitive glandular tissue. And you can do a similar kind of thing here, leaning forward, leaning back, using the legs to focus on modulating that intensity of that penetration. And then the giving partner here also has the opportunity to use maybe soft edging, maybe just gently stroking the back, just very lightly, maybe holding just the focus on the depth of the penetration and not necessarily using a lot of friction. All of this opens up a lot of opportunity because even the receiving partner here, he can really get a lot of stimulation simply by using those Kegel muscles. So you might not see a lot happening, but internally, contracting those Kegel muscles is going to help to stimulate that prostate gland. So now we're going to look at edging with accessories. So these are really fun products that we can use, we can invite into our play. These are two Satisfier products. The first that I want to highlight here is our Satisfier Men Wand. And then we also have the Satisfier Curvy 2 Plus, which also comes app enabled. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But so if we talk about the Satisfier Men Wand, this was really designed with the penis in mind. But you can use this in context of really almost any erogenous zone. But what you see here, there are these really nice little wings. So when we activate the vibration here, it might be a little hard to see, but you see that little movement. They're a little bit of a fluttering action. So you can use that to stimulate the scrotal tissue. You can use that to vibrate right into that root. You can slide up into that frenular band all the way up into the glands of the penis. Or additionally, you could literally just sit on top of this product to vibrate into those pelvic floor muscles to stimulate that perineal tissue. So that you can do with really with anyone, and it's a wonderful way to explore arousal. And then next we have the Satisfier Curvy 2 Plus. So this is amazing new product. It's fully coated with silicone, so that means it's really soft to the touch. And what its focus is on air pulse stimulation. So basically there's a little hole or opening here. And what happens is there's air pulse that literally is indirectly stimulating the glands of the clitoris. So, and as we talked about before, the glands are just that external portion. That's just the part that we see. Behind that, internally, is the whole structure of the clitoris. So what this product does is it helps to activate, it helps to get some of those tissues engorged. I will say that it's helpful to use this at a very low setting if you're exploring edging, because it can take you over the edge. You can also use the air pulse on any of the external tissue. You don't have to just focus on the glands of the clitoris, kind of similar to that tapping action. And then you can also use vibration. This whole thing vibrates. So you can stimulate the entire area of the vulva really with a nice soft focus. So that's a really wonderful way additionally to explore. And now with new technology, and we can also explore edging at a distance. So you might also already be doing this with sexting your partner, having sexy conversations over the phone. That's a wonderful way to do it. But now with our Satisfier Connect app, you can actually explore a new technology, the technology of teledildonic connection. And that just means that now you can explore conducting devices at a distance using a haptic touch to really personalize those program settings to surprise your partner. And you have the added benefit within the remote play feature, which I'm really excited about, is that you can see your partner. You actually get to see them in real time through the video streaming technology. You get to see their facial expressions. You get to hear their voice, their body, and that allows us to stay tuned in, in a more subtle way. But it's going to be a really, really exciting way to explore, and it's going to accompany a lot of our new products, and it will be launched mid-November, and we'll be incorporating over 100 different products will be coming out very, very soon, and up to 200 different products coming out within the next 2 years. So it's very, very exciting. And I just want to end here just this wonderful quote from Shakespeare. Because there's so much, within the context of edging, but I think this one is a nice way to help us remember. So, graze on my lips, and if those hills be dry, stray lower, where the pleasant fountains lie. So as you're exploring edging, remember to graze. Remember sometimes where it's important to stray, and remember to search for those fountains. They might be hidden, right? And that is an amazing way to unlock that potential within your own body and also within the context of your partnership. So thank you guys so much for staying through till the end. This has been a real pleasure and just a real joy to explore with you today. And now we're going to go ahead and open it up to some questions. So anything that came up while you were watching, please feel free to share in the chat box, and we'll have a wonderful conversation now around edging.
Yes, thank you, Megwin. Now is the time for the Q&A portion of the presentation. So if you have any questions, please share them with us through the Zoom console. We'll do our best to answer as many as we can. And feel free to make use of Zoom's anonymous feature if that makes you feel more comfortable. With that, let's get started with the first question. I have a question here from Ashley, who says, I'm very fortunate with reaching orgasm very easily and quickly. What techniques would you recommend for a person who can go 0 to orgasm in less than a minute?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I would really look, again, this is going to be super personal, but I would look at the breath is one thing. So that ability to stay tuned into your body, really allowing yourself to slow down the breath. So again, when you notice yourself going towards that climax, you might notice that there's some tension. So observing where there's tension and kind of breathing into it is a really important way to kind of slow down that rush towards that climax. But also shifting focus, so trying something different, maybe exploring again in like a place like a bathtub, some place where you can really relax and maybe not get as excited. And if you're masturbating to porn, sometimes that can kind of reinforce that quick arousal response. So it's might be like kind of omitting those omitting that for the time being, just to kind of experiment with building up your own fantasy realm. So this is a hard question. It's a very rich question. I would say it's very personal to each individual, but I would say, really looking at that framework, that 5-10 framework, and really observing those more subtle states and allowing yourself to indulge in those as well would be really helpful.
Great, thank you. I have a question here from Anonymous who asks, how many times can I edge during self-play? So is there a
Wow.
maximum? Is there...
No, I would say that there's no maximum. Really, I think when you really start to develop more comfort around this as a practice, you will not even be counting. This will be something that will be a natural thing to explore. But in the beginning, I would say to try to practice at least 3 times. So if you're really used to that experience of moving towards climax, really practice that stop-start method and do it at least 3 times. And then once you get comfortable with it, you can practice edging really till the cows come home. Like you could do it all night long and keep going.
Great, thank you. I have a question here from Thomas who asks, do you have any suggestions on how to introduce the topic of edging with your partner?
Yeah, so I think that, first I would say, introducing this topic with your partner in a space where you're both relaxed, ideally when you both have eye contact. I wouldn't introduce this, in the context of an argument, for instance. So really noting the space, allowing it to be the right timing for you to introduce this to your partner. And also, perhaps even sharing in the context of your intimacy. So it can be something that happens spontaneously in the moment and say, hey, I was thinking about maybe exploring edging your arousal a little bit, and maybe even laying out a few of these techniques. Like maybe we'll stop and I can use something like grounding touch, or we can shift focus as a technique, as we explore. But ultimately, I think for the most part, if you introduce this to your partner, they are going to, it can be very much a turn on. So just remember again that you bringing it up in conversation is actually a contribution to the intimacy and to sharing it with that pleasure in mind. So bring that curiosity and that pleasure when you do share with a partner.
Great. I have a question sort of in similar vein. This person they love the vocal concept of excited the vagus nerve. But what if you have a partner who likes to be more quiet during sex? And what approach would you recommend to hopefully invite your partner to vocalize a little bit more with tone, words, any noise?
Yeah, well, first thing is that, there's no right way to necessarily orgasm. Some of us like to express more with sound and some of us don't. So just remember that it's not, the importance is the pleasure of your partner. So if they're not necessarily expressing with their voice, it doesn't mean that they're not enjoying it. Remember that whole concept of the arousal non-concordance. But if it's something that you want to explore, I would say that oral sex, oral stimulation is an amazing space to bring in this concept of vocal edging or even kissing. But I would say oral sex is amazing because you're literally right on the genitals. You're able to vibrate into the tissues. And that kind of opens up our minds. It's like, wow, to just the power of the voice. It can be a wonderful invitation to experience a completely new sensation, just like having a new sexual wellness device. It's something I think that a lot of people haven't maybe had the experience of as much. So just invite yourself to explore, but really explore vibrating directly into those more highly erogenous zones like the genitals or even into the mouth. Modeling, is a wonderful way that we actually do learn to experiment. And thank you for that question.
Yeah, thank you, Megwin, for the great answer. I have a question here from Nicole who asks about women's arousal accordance. Do you have any recommendations on how we can connect the genital response to more subjective arousal?
Yeah. Wow. Well, I think that's kind of the journey that we're always on. I would say that, again, I showed you a few models, but we also introduced the vagus nerve. So, these models are always being revised and relooked at. And I would say that I think one of the missing things in the context of some of these models is the ability to physiologically downregulate the nervous system and to really connect the brain to the genitals. So the vagus nerve is an incredible pathway and portal to that connection. So things like breath and voice and embodied expression, all of these things are going to help to contribute to being more in alignment with what's going on up here to what's going on down here. So, a very simple practice, though, a takeaway that I think works incredibly well, it could be done every single night right before you go to bed, is to just work with a little bit of oil. I like to use coconut oil and just literally hold your genitals, whether it's your vulva or whether you're right underneath the scrotal tissue in the perineum, if you're someone with a penis, and hold your other hand on your heart. You're going to literally be able to hold your whole vagus nerve. So in the context of that experience, drop into that breath. Allow yourself to feel yourself rooting into your body. Allow yourself to explore fantasies. Even giving ourselves permission to experiment with different fantasies, I think is something that wanes as we get older. I know that when I was a kid, I explored having fantasies of all sorts of different things. But as we get older, we get normalized, we forget that there's all this potential. So that's a wonderful way to, I think, really build that connection. But yeah, it's something that, that I think is the mission, of sexual wellness and of us really diving more and more deeply into the subject matter.
Great. Thank you, Megwin. I have a question here from Anonymous, who asks, how does temperature, environmental, or direct skin contact influence edging?
Oh my God, I'm so happy that Anonymous asked this, because first of all, when I embarked on this webinar, there was just so much that I wanted to talk about. And temperature absolutely is such a powerful way to edge. And I really honestly could have been its own little, its own medium or application. We did do a webinar recently called Temperature Play. You can explore that webinar to really learn about different applications and practices within the context of that. But temperature is powerful because we actually have neural sensors in our skin and our body that detect temperature. So sometimes when our body becomes normalized to, let's say, being warm, the temperature of the room, using something like ice can shock the system, can open it up to new sensory pathways. Or, similarly, you can use heat, right, to allow someone to relax more deeply into the bodies. You can also use different sensual lubricants that also have a similar type of effect. I have recently been introduced to figging, which is basically using ginger as a form of stimulation. And that actually works on building heat inside the body. And it's an amazing way to explore edging. But yeah, it's a different sensation. So it definitely is something to consider and to think about. And I highly, highly recommend exploring it.
Thank you. I have another question from Anonymous, who asks, is the use of chastity cages or other chastity toys a form of, or can they be integrated into edging?
Yes, absolutely. That could have been also another theme we could have explored. And I'm so happy that you asked about that. That's an amazing way of absolutely exploring edging, even from a distance. There's new technologies where you can actually conduct those cages to inhibit that arousal response, because edging doesn't have to just be in the context of those highly aroused states. It can be even in states that we're not even very aroused at all, or let's say physically showing that arousal response. So yeah, that's an amazing edging tool. And I'm really glad that you that you brought it up in the context today.
Great. Thank you. Just trying to find one last question to close us off. Yeah, so this is a question from Rome, who asks, when I'm struggling to reach solo orgasm, would edging be helpful or would it create an opposite effect?
So could you repeat the question one more time, Tiffany?
Yeah. When challenged to reach solo orgasm, would edging be helpful or create an opposite effect? I have another question actually in a similar vein. Someone had asked, when trying to edge with my wife, she can sometimes get stuck and find it hard to go over the edge. What would you suggest?
Yeah, I think what's coming to mind as I hear the question and how the questions are framed, perhaps to help support this, is that edging doesn't necessarily mean not being in a state of arousal. So even though you're holding back to build the arousal, you're still in it. You're still actually staying connected. So it could be, for instance, that maybe when someone holds back from stimulation, that actually we contract in anxiety. It's like, I need it, I want it. So that state of I need it, I want it, like, give me some more attention, is not going to lend itself to that orgasmic release response. Remember the flower that we saw before? It's really so much about surrender. So when you're in those states where you're feeling the experience is being edged, it's actually an opportunity to drop into that vacuum space. And the way we can do that, I think the best, is really through the breath, through staying connected really deeply, viscerally, to our own breath and also to that of our partner. So I think that I'm sensing that that may be something that's coming up here, is maybe there's a tension buildup, and that tension is actually inhibiting sensory pathways to receive pleasure. So do what you can, maybe use grounding touch. That might be really helpful here to help ground the body, ground the nervous system, or even use a toy, use a product to ground the blood flow. Very, very helpful to use that, especially in that pelvic floor area. Sounds like we could go on and on, honestly, with this topic of edging. But yeah, it sounds like that's all we have time for today.
Yeah, so with that final question, that brings today's webinar to a close. Thank you to all of you who attended. We hope you had a blast, and a huge thank you to Megwin and Satisfyer for sharing your time and expertise. Megwin, if you have any last words.
Yeah, no, thank you so much just for, coming here, for being here with us, and to really bringing an open mind. And thank you so much to Kinkley for creating this platform where we can continue to explore these topics and really create a community to, an ongoing discussion around all these topics. It's been a huge pleasure to be with you today, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you again very, very soon.
Great, thank you so much. As we mentioned earlier, we'll be sending out a link to the recording shortly. If you have any further questions in the meantime, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can reach Kinkley at webmaster@kinkley.com. Thank you.
Thank you.